Hello everyone, my name is Manues and welcome to another Eternal Contenders. Today I'm going to talk about Obelisk Combrei, or Combre aggro as some people call it. While this deck is not necessarily a tier 1 deck, it's one of the better tier 2 decks. You even see it in tournament play, and it also has been doing well in tournaments in the past, and it definitely has its potential and its strengths. So let's talk about the deck list and the card choices. Initiate of the Sands is basically a mainstay in Obelisk decks. If a deck has 4 Xenan Obelisk and is built around it, you usually find for Initiate of the Sands, simply because it lets you flood the board quicker, and Obelisk turns the marginal body of Initiate into a relevant threat, while Initiate helps hit the threshold of 8 for Obelisk quicker. Next we have the 2-drops. Awakened Student, best aggressive 2-drop in the game alongside Argent Port, Instigator and Champion of Chaos. Usually attacks for 3 on turn 3, and from there on usually grows a couple times more till it often eventually reaches the size of Sandstorm Titan and other mid-game threats being able to attack into them freely, which makes it a great aggressive card if it also scales well into the later game, since aggro decks often have the problem of their units getting outclassed by bigger stuff in the mid to late game, while cards like Awakened Student perfectly scale with the progress of the game to keep their relevance, which is nice. Next we have for Desert Marshal, basically one of the reasons to be Combre. I don't think there's any self-respecting Combre-colored, base Combre-colored deck out there that doesn't run for Desert Marshal, be it control, aggro, or mid-range. No matter what, Desert Marshal is just great. Ambush helps you protect against relic weapons. Silence helps you deal with Aegis and various annoying abilities, and also stuff like flying from opposing units. And the 2-1 body also makes it for a decent early blocker to trade with aggressive units, or harass a control player with an empty board if there's nothing better to do. And the last 2-drop is Temple Scribe, simply something that you often also see alongside Xenan Obelisk, because it helps us hit that 8 power threshold by digging for power drops and makes sure that we don't get stuck on power early on, and generally helps us reduce the size of our deck to virtually 71 cards by adding 4 cantrips, and therefore increases the chance of drawing our other cards over the course of a game, which is great. And Obelisk turns the marginal body into a relevant body, and gaining 1 life and a 1/1 that don't cost us a card are really nice early on against more aggressive decks to trade with their X1 early drops. One thing that I'm currently trying is to find a way, simply because the deck is very power hungry. We have Siraf's activation at 8, we have Great Parliament for 2 owls at 8, and Xenan Obelisk's threshold at 8. So we kind of really want to hit 8 power in almost every game, at around turn 8 or 9 preferably, between Initiate and stuff. So in order to be able to do that without running a million sigils that would get us flooded, is playing cards that give us multiple things, either 2 power in 1 card, or a unit and a card and a power in 1 card. So Find a Way basically is better than additional regular power cards would be, because once we have like 6 power, and if we draw a Find a Way, that jumps us all the way to 8, while a regular power would only get us to 7, and it would probably take us like 2 more turns to get to 8 on average. So that's the purpose of the card. Only 2, because it's really slow and clunky, but helps us saturate the power hungry needs of our mid to late game cards, and make sure that we get there without flooding too much. Then we have Vanquish, one of those reasons to be Justice in this game. Almost every Justice deck in this game runs 3 Vanquish. This is no different. Deals with all the best units in the game: Impending Doom, Reaper, Drake, Sandstorm Titan, Champion of Chaos. All these powerful, hard to deal with, must answer units that otherwise can quickly cause problems and end the game. Then we have for Ember Acolyte, a lot of people only run 2 or 3 here. I definitely want 4. Basically the same as in Shimmer Pack. Just one of those go-to cards if you have Obelisk in your deck, since it's a body for Obelisk that is also a Sigil. So it is better than a regular unit that wouldn't give us a Sigil, since we would otherwise not have enough power in our deck to get to 8. And it's better than a regular Sigil, because otherwise we would not have enough things to do with our power and not enough units to be affected by our Obelisk. And yeah, that's why I think any deck that runs Obelisk should probably run 4 of these. For Siraf, doesn't need much explanation. Good on turn 3, good on turn 7, 8 plus. Can easily run away with the game if unanswered late in the game, and is a decent attacker and blocker early on. And the last 3-drop is for Valkyrie Enforcer. 3/3 flying for 3 is already pretty good. This deck has mostly ground pounders, and the ground can get clogged up pretty quickly, and having an Enforcer that can attack for 3 or 4 in the air each turn is really nice to keep the pressure going and force the opponent to deal with it. And having more silence is great to deal with the multitude of great silence targets in most unit heavier decks in this game. And even if there aren't any, a 3/3 flyer for 3 is already a great rate, just as an attacker and blocker. The thing that I'm not running at the moment, which a lot of people would be surprised about, is Combre Healer. I just feel like the deck has too many 3-drops otherwise, and gets these hands with like a million 3-drops where you play 3-drops on 4, wasting a power, or you have 2 3-drops on 5, so you can't go 3-drop, 2-drop, and just play like a 3-drop and waste 2 power, and stuff like that. It makes the deck run a lot less moves and waste a lot of power and play a lot clunkier. And as I explained, all these 3 cards are cards that I want 4 of. And if you look at Shimmer Pack, for example, which has a similar strategy, their 3-drops look even way worse in terms of offense and defense, and are much more fragile. And we already have the robust Siraf and the solid Enforcer on 3, and Shimmer Pack has nothing comparably. So I think we should still be very fine without Healer. And in a lot of matchups, Healer is pretty underwhelming outside of like the very aggressive decks. And so far I felt that my matchups against decks like Jido and other aggressive decks are not particularly worse without Healer. If I just do something else on 3, like play a Siraf instead of a Healer, it's not a big difference. And a lot of the time you have a Siraf and a Healer in hand, then you obviously play the Healer over the Siraf. But if you only have the Siraf, or have a Siraf and an Acolyte, you just play the Siraf, and it's not that different from when you would have a Healer and just not play the Siraf. So yeah, I think Healer is not a great loss. I might be wrong there. If you play against a lot of aggro and feel like you're losing a lot, and lose in a way where the 3 extra life and beefy early blocker from Healer would make a difference, you can try and fit some in again. I probably wouldn't run more than like 3. But right now I don't think I want them. I'm just happy with how the deck plays in the matchups where Healer would be the best. And I'm happy to not have Healer in the slower matchups where he just is a kind of irrelevant 2/5, where I'd rather play like an Ember Acolyte that draws me a Sigil in addition to being a 2-power attacker. Then we have for Sandstorm Titan, not much explanation needed. One of the best time cards in the game and reasons to be time. One thing I forgot is the Stand Together. Let me quickly address that. The thing with Stand Together is basically this deck is pretty susceptible to Harsh Rule, simply because we run 32 units plus 4 Parliament, so 36 units, and Ember Monument, so up to 38 units. So that's a lot of units and very little to stop someone from just harsh ruling us and killing all our stuff. And so harsh rule is a fairly big problem. Sure, there's some ways to mitigate that with like 2-for-1 units and ways to refill with Parliament and so on. But it still is problematic and it doesn't work all the time, especially if the opponent is doing enough other stuff than harsh ruling. So Stand Together is a great answer for that. So basically, if they harsh rule us and we don't have Stand Together, we not necessarily lose the game, but we are behind and probably in like a tough spot. But if we have Stand Together and they don't have harsh rule, it's fine. It's still kind of a one-shot Obelisk that adds Aegis to our stuff, helps counter spot removal, and just apply pressure. It's just a fairly versatile trick that does various things. And if they have harsh rule and we have Stand Together, and they try to harsh rule us when we get to cast Stand Together, we win the game on the spot. So it's basically a card that is pretty solid all around, and just means I win the game against stuff like harsh rule or witch into a sweeper, any kind of sweeper that we want to stop. It's very possible that there should even be a third one. For now I only run 2 due to spatial concerns, and also because I'm not playing against too many decks where I feel like I need it. If you play against a lot of sweepers, feel free to go up to 3 in the main deck and just blow them out. Every time you cast it, the game usually ends right there. Back to the 4-drops. Great Parliament. It's a decent 4-drop. It's not as good as Titan on turn 4, but a 4/4 flyer is still not much worse than Impending Doom, especially because it doesn't deal us a damage. And once we hit our threshold of 8, this becomes a card that is easily capable of winning the game alone, especially with an Obelisk, because 2/6/6 flyers beat about everything in the air, and even a Titan that is keeping them from flying. So, and against slower decks like control-ish decks, once we get to 12 power deep in the late game and they still haven't won, if we cast it, which is often the case for control decks because they win slowly, can just cast a Great Parliament for 3 owls, and if they don't have a sweeper, that usually means they lose the game. So it's a card that gets better the longer the game goes and the more we flood. So it's basically also great flood protection and a solid 4-drop, as well as a way to beat control decks in the late game. And for Xenan Obelisk, the core card of the deck and the card the deck is built around, not much explanation needed. Last we have 28 power, 2 Ember Monument to mitigate flood and have a makeshift 5-drop, since a 5/5 Overwhelm for 5 is a pretty good rate for a 5-drop, especially given that it's also helping us not get screwed in the early game. Heavier leaning towards time, simply because we have Initiate, we have double time for Temple Scribe, and Acolyte to fix our justice. And for Diplomatic Seal to have as many turn 1 time, while also being capable of having enough early justice for our 2-drops and double justice for our Enforcer. And the 8 duels as usual. Alright, that's the deck. I'm gonna jump into a couple of Masters games with this to show it in action as usual. So stay tuned for that, and if you haven't liked or subscribed yet, please do so to help the channel grow, and follow me on social media if you want to get more frequent updates on how I'm doing on the ladder in both formats and with what draft decks I'm going, 7 wins and stuff like that. Alright, stay tuned for the games in a moment.